An entire Roman army, over 5,000 elite soldiers, vanished from history. No battlefield, no mass grave, no official Roman explanation. So, tonight, we're solving one question that has haunted historians for centuries. Did Rome lose the Ninth Legion to brutal defeat, or did it erase the truth on purpose? For centuries, Rome stood as the most powerful military machine the ancient world had ever seen. Its legions conquered continents, crushed rebellions, and left behind records carved in stone. But one legion broke the pattern. The Ninth Legion Hispana didn't retire. It didn't march home in triumph. It simply disappeared. No official defeat, no victory monument, just silence. And that silence may be the most revealing clue of all. Imagine waking up one morning to discover that an entire modern army division has vanished. No distress call, no battlefield footage, no official announcement. That is exactly the scale of the mystery surrounding Rome's Ninth Legion, and it's why historians still struggle to explain what happened nearly 2,000 years later. The Ninth Legion Hispana was not a minor unit tucked away on a forgotten frontier. This was a hardened Roman legion, forged in conquest, disciplined by decades of warfare, and trusted by emperors themselves. At full strength, it numbered over 5,000 trained soldiers, supported by engineers, cavalry units, camp followers, and supply lines that stretched across the empire. A force like this did not simply disappear by accident, and yet it did. Roman records are famously meticulous. Legion movements were tracked, victories were celebrated in stone, and defeats, however humiliating, were eventually acknowledged. Even Rome's most devastating military disaster, the annihilation of 3 legions in the Teutoburg forest, was recorded in painful detail. Names were remembered, numbers were counted, blame was assigned. But with the Ninth Legion, there is only silence. The last solid evidence places the legion in Romang, Britain, stationed at Ibracum, modern-day York, sometime in the early 2nd century. Inscriptions confirm their presence. Fortifications bear their mark, then the trail stops abruptly. No tombstones marking fallen officers, no veteran settlements, no official mention of disbandment or reassignment. For an empire obsessed with control, this absence is alarming. If the Ninth Legion had been destroyed in battle, Rome would normally respond with reinforcements, retaliation, or at the very least, acknowledgement. Yet there is no record of a major emergency response in Britain that matches the loss of an entire legion. No new legion is explicitly raised to replace them. No massive rebuilding effort follows. So historians are left asking a disturbing question: how can something so large leave such a small footprint? Some scholars argue that the disappearance itself is the clue. The lack of evidence may not be accidental, it may be deliberate. Roman history, after all, was written to glorify Rome, not expose its vulnerabilities. A defeat that threatened imperial authority or embarrassed an emperor could be quietly erased, its records lost, destroyed, or never written at all. But erasing a legion is no simple task. Soldiers write letters, veterans retire. Stone inscriptions are expensive and permanent. To wipe a legion from history requires more than time, it requires intention. And that raises the stakes of the mystery even further. What could have happened that made Rome choose silence over explanation? There is also the psychological dimension. The Roman army was built on the myth of invincibility. Legions were symbols of order facing chaos. If the Ninth Legion met an enemy it could not defeat, especially on the empire's edge, that story would undermine the very idea of Roman dominance. And so the vanishing act becomes more than a military puzzle. It becomes a historical anomaly, a gap where certainty should exist, a reminder that even the greatest empires have moments they would rather forget. The Ninth Legion did not leave behind a final speech, a heroic last stand, or a clear moment of destruction. What it left behind was something far more unsettling, a question mark carved into the heart of Roman history, challenging everything we assume about power, record-keeping, and truth. When historians try to reconstruct the fate of the Ninth Legion, they quickly encounter a problem that is just as frustrating as missing evidence. The ancient sources cannot agree with each other. Roman writers, who should have provided clarity, instead left behind contradictions, gaps, and silences that deepen the mystery rather than solve it. Ancient history depends heavily on a small number of surviving authors. Names like Tacitus, Suetonius, Cassius Dio, and later chroniclers shape how we understand Rome today. These men wrote about emperors, wars, rebellions, and scandals in remarkable detail. Yet when it comes to the Ninth Legion, their accounts become strangely quiet or worse, confusing. Tacitus, one of Rome's most reliable historians, describes violent unrest in Britain during the early 2nd century. He speaks of fierce resistance from northern tribes and Roman forces struggling to maintain control, but he never explicitly mentions the destruction of the Ninth Legion. This absence is striking because Tacitus did not shy away from documenting Roman failures. If an entire legion had been wiped out in Britain during his lifetime, it would have been one of the most significant military disasters of the era. Later, historians create even more uncertainty. Some Roman military lists include the Ninth Legion up to a certain point, while later versions simply omit it, offering no explanation for its disappearance. The legion doesn't appear as destroyed, it doesn't appear as disbanded, it just stops being listed. For modern historians, this is like watching a character walk into a room and never come back out, with no stage direction explaining why. Adding to the confusion is the fact that ancient historians often wrote with political agendas. Their works were not neutral records. They were shaped by loyalty, fear, and survival. Praising the wrong emperor or revealing an uncomfortable truth could cost a writer their career or their life. Silence, therefore, could be safer than honesty. Some sources hint at heavy Roman losses on distant frontiers but remain vague about which units were involved. Others focus on victories and stability during the same period, painting a picture of imperial control that doesn't align with the idea of a catastrophic defeat. These conflicting tones raise an important question. Are we seeing history as it happened, or history as Rome wanted it remembered? The problem becomes even more complex when later medieval writers try to fill in the gaps. Writing centuries after the events, they often relied on incomplete Roman texts and local legends. Over time, speculation hardened into assumed fact. The idea that the Ninth Legion was massacred in Britain became widely accepted, not because ancient sources confirmed it, but because it felt plausible and dramatic. Yet plausibility is not proof. What we are left with is a puzzle made of half-statements and missing chapters. The ancient sources don't lie outright, but they don't tell the full story either. Each historian offers a fragment, a hint, or a carefully worded silence that forces modern scholars to read between the lines. This raises a deeper issue about how we understand ancient history itself. When multiple sources disagree, historians must decide which voices to trust, which omissions matter, and which narratives were shaped by power rather than truth. In the case of the Ninth Legion, the contradictions may be the most honest evidence we have. Because when writers avoid a subject collectively, when lists quietly drop a name, and when explanations are never offered, it suggests something happened that no one wanted to explain openly. The mystery of the Ninth Legion may not lie in a lost battlefield, but in the uncomfortable space where ancient historians chose caution over clarity for generations. The most popular explanation for the disappearance of the Ninth Legion placed its final moments in the wild north of Roman Britain. The image is powerful and easy to imagine Roman soldiers marching into mist-covered hills, facing fierce tribal warriors and never returning. This version of the story became so deeply embedded in popular history that it was rarely questioned. But when the evidence is examined closely, the certainty begins to fall apart. Britain in the early 2nd century was one of Rome's most unstable provinces. Rebellions were frequent, supply lines were stretched, and the land beyond Roman control was unfamiliar and hostile. Ancient sources described northern tribes as relentless fighters who knew the terrain far better than any invading army. If a legion were to vanish, Britain seems like the perfect setting. Yet the problem is scale. The loss of an entire legion would have been a military catastrophe. Such an event would demand immediate reinforcement, dramatic retaliation, and a visible shift in Roman strategy. But the historical record shows no sudden panic in Britain. Construction continued. Administration remained intact. Rome did not abandon the province, nor did it rush to explain a massive defeat. Then comes the archaeological challenge to the traditional narrative. Inscriptions bearing the name of the Ninth Legion have been discovered outside Britain, some dating later than the supposed destruction of the unit in the north. These finds suggest the Legion may have survived long enough to be transferred elsewhere. If the Ninth Legion left Britain intact, then the story of its annihilation there collapses entirely. This opens the door to an alternative possibility. The Legion was redeployed to another frontier of the Empire, one far less romantic but far more dangerous. Rome in the 2nd century faced mounting pressure along its eastern borders. Conflicts in Judea, tensions along the Danube, and unrest in the eastern provinces demanded experienced troops. A battle-hardened legion like the Ninth would have been a logical choice for redeployment. But these regions were also politically sensitive, and defeats there carried serious consequences. If the Ninth Legion met disaster in the east, the loss could have been tied to rebellion, religious conflict, or internal instability situations Rome preferred to downplay or obscure. Unlike Britain, where distance allowed stories to flourish, the eastern provinces were closer to the heart of imperial politics. A failure there would reflect directly on the emperor himself. This creates a striking contrast between two possibilities. In Britain, the Ninth Legion would have fallen to external enemies, reinforcing the idea of Rome battling barbarian chaos at the edges of civilization. Beyond Britain, however, the Legion's disappearance could point to a more troubling truth: Rome struggling to control its own empire. The debate is no longer just about geography. It's about which explanation better fits Rome's behavior. The quiet removal of the Ninth Legion from military records aligns more closely with a politically sensitive loss than with a frontier massacre that could be blamed on distant tribes. As scholars continue to analyze inscriptions, troop movements, and strategic needs of the empire, the question becomes increasingly difficult to ignore. Was the Ninth Legion truly lost in the fog of Britain, or was its final chapter written far from the place history long assumed? Because the location of its disappearance changes everything from who defeated Rome to why Rome chose not to tell the story at all. Archaeology is supposed to speak when written history falls quiet. Stones, bones, inscriptions, and ruins often reveal what ancient authors chose to ignore or never recorded. That is why the mystery of the Ninth Legion becomes even more unsettling when archaeology, instead of providing answers, seems to fall silent as well. Roman legions left trails wherever they went. Forts, roads, altars, weapons, tombstones, and dedicatory inscriptions were part of everyday military life. Soldiers carved their unit names into stone to mark construction projects, honor fallen comrades, and dedicate offerings to the gods. Even centuries later, these marks usually survive. For most Roman legions, archaeologists can trace movements with remarkable precision. But when it comes to the Ninth Legion, the material record abruptly stops. In Britain, their presence is clearly established up to a point. Stones bearing their name appear at forts and walls. Then suddenly nothing. No mass graves. No layers of destruction that signal a catastrophic battle. No abandoned equipment fields frozen in time. The kind of evidence expected from the violent destruction of thousands of soldiers simply does not exist. This absence forces historians to confront an uncomfortable possibility. The Legion did not die in one dramatic event. If the Ninth Legion had been ambushed or wiped out in a single battle, the ground itself would likely preserve traces of that moment. Broken weapons, scattered armor, hurried burials, or signs of burned fortifications would tell the story long after words failed. Instead, archaeologists find continuity sites remain occupied. Roads remain maintained, and Roman infrastructure continues without interruption. Silence in archaeology is not always accidental. It can point to something slow, controlled, and deliberate. One explanation is gradual dismantling. If the Legion suffered losses over time through disease, smaller skirmishes, or internal collapse, it may have been quietly absorbed into other units. Soldiers reassigned, standards retired, and the Legion's name slowly erased from official use. This kind of disappearance would leave very little physical evidence behind. Another possibility is intentional removal of traces. Rome had both the authority and resources to reshape landscapes and narratives. In cases of mutiny, treason, or disgrace, legions could be punished not just militarily, but symbolically. Names could be removed from inscriptions, monuments defaced, and records altered. This process, known as damnatio memoria, was used against disgraced emperors and officials. Applying it to a legion would be extreme but not impossible. The absence of Ninth Legion tombstones is particularly striking. Roman soldiers typically marked their deaths with inscriptions that recorded their unit, rank, and years of service. Thousands of such stones survive across the empire. Yet for the Ninth Legion, these personal markers vanish after a certain point, as if the men themselves faded from official remembrance. Archaeological silence then becomes its own kind of evidence. It suggests that whatever happened to the Ninth Legion did not produce chaos visible in the soil. It hints at control, containment, and perhaps embarrassment rather than open disaster. Every missing inscription and unexplained gap forces historians to rethink what disappearance really means. Not all losses are loud, not all endings leave ruins behind. Sometimes the ground stays quiet because the story was meant to be forgotten, and in the case of the Ninth Legion, the Earth's refusal to speak may be the most revealing clue of all. For centuries, the disappearance of the Ninth Legion was treated as a closed case built on assumption rather than proof. But modern archaeology, technology, and historical reanalysis have reopened the mystery in ways earlier scholars could never have imagined. Today, the story of the Ninth Legion is no longer confined to ancient texts. It is being reshaped by new clues that challenge everything once believed to be certain. One of the most significant developments comes from inscriptions discovered far from Britain. Stone fragments bearing the name of the Ninth Legion have been found on the European continent, some dated later than the time the legion was supposedly destroyed in northern Britain. These inscriptions suggest that the legion, or at least part of it, continued to exist after its alleged annihilation. This forces historians to confront an uncomfortable possibility: the traditional timeline is wrong. Modern scholars now propose that the Ninth Legion may have been transferred rather than destroyed. Rome frequently moved legions across vast distances to respond to crises. A unit stationed in Britain one year could be fighting rebels in Judea or guarding the Danube the next. If the Ninth Legion was redeployed, its disappearance may reflect a bureaucratic change rather than a battlefield catastrophe. Another theory gaining attention focuses on gradual attrition rather than sudden destruction. Instead of a single decisive battle, the Legion may have suffered a slow breakdown. Disease, harsh climates, supply shortages, and repeated smaller engagements could have weakened the unit beyond recovery. Over time, surviving soldiers may have been merged into other legions, leaving the Ninth's identity to quietly fade from the records. Advances in archaeological methods have also transformed how historians approach the mystery. Improved dating techniques allow researchers to reassess old finds with greater accuracy. Sites once dismissed as irrelevant are being re-examined, revealing new chronological patterns. What once appeared as an end now looks more like a transition. Digital analysis has added another layer. By mapping known Roman military movements and comparing them with gaps in documentation, historians can identify moments where records suddenly go silent. The disappearance of the Ninth Legion aligns with periods of political instability, when emperors were particularly sensitive to public perception. This coincidence has led some scholars to argue that the Legion's fate was deliberately obscured to protect imperial authority. There is also renewed interest in the idea of internal conflict. Mutiny was Rome's greatest military fear. A rebellious legion threatened not just a province but the emperor himself. If the Ninth Legion mutinied or was suspected of disloyalty, it could have been dismantled and erased as a warning to others. In such a case, silence would be policy, not accident. Perhaps the most intriguing modern theory suggests that the Ninth Legion's story is fragmented because it was never meant to be told as a single event. Pieces of its fate may be scattered across different provinces, absorbed into different narratives, and hidden behind administrative language. Instead of asking where the Legion died, historians are now asking how it disappeared. What unites these modern theories is a shift in perspective. The mystery is no longer about finding a lost battlefield. It is about understanding how Rome managed failure, reshaped memory, and controlled history itself. As new evidence continues to surface, the Ninth Legion stands not as a symbol of defeat, but as a reminder that history is often written in what is left unsaid. At first glance, the disappearance of the Ninth Legion may seem like a niche puzzle buried deep in ancient history, a curiosity for scholars and enthusiasts. But the reason this mystery continues to capture attention is because it reaches far beyond one lost Roman unit. The fate of the Ninth Legion forces us to confront how power operates, how narratives are controlled, and how history itself is shaped by those who survive to tell it. Rome was not just a military empire, it was an empire of image. Legions were symbols of order, discipline, and inevitability. They represented the idea that Rome always advanced, always prevailed, and always imposed structure on chaos. To lose a legion without explanation challenges that image at its core. It introduces uncertainty into a system built on certainty. That is why the Ninth Legion matters. Its disappearance exposes the limits of Roman control, not only over territory, but over truth. The absence of clear records suggests that even the most powerful empire in the ancient world struggled to manage failure. When things went wrong, Rome did not always respond with transparency. Sometimes it responded with silence. This has profound implications for how we interpret ancient sources. Historians are trained to analyze what is written, but the story of the Ninth Legion reminds us to pay equal attention to what is missing. Gaps in records are not empty spaces. They are active clues. They tell us where pressure existed, where embarrassment may have shaped documentation, and where power influenced memory. And the mystery also humanizes the Roman Empire. Behind every legion were thousands of individual soldiers who enlisted for pay, land, or loyalty to Rome. They marched, built roads, guarded frontiers, and faced dangers far from home. The disappearance of the Ninth Legion is not just an abstract historical event. It represents thousands of lives that faded from the official story. Their silence reminds us that history often privileges institutions over individuals. In modern times, this mystery resonates because it mirrors how information is still controlled today. Governments shape narratives. Failures are reframed, minimized, or quietly buried. Records are classified, altered, or selectively released. The Ninth Legion becomes a case study in how authority decides what deserves remembrance and what does not. The ongoing debate also highlights the evolving nature of historical truth. Each generation revisits the mystery with new tools, new questions, and new perspectives. What once seemed settled is reopened. Assumptions are challenged. Certainty gives way to complexity. The Ninth Legion teaches us that history is not static, it is a conversation across time. Perhaps most importantly, the mystery endures because it resists a simple answer. There is no final battle scene, no dramatic conclusion carved in stone. Instead, there is ambiguity, and that ambiguity forces us to engage, to question, and to think critically about the past rather than passively accept it. The Ninth Legion may be lost, but its absence continues to shape our understanding of Rome, of power, and of the fragile line between memory and forgetting. The story of the Ninth Legion does not end with a battlefield, a date, or a final line in a Roman chronicle. It ends in uncertainty, and that uncertainty is precisely what gives the mystery its power. Across inscriptions that fall silent, ancient sources that contradict one another, and archaeological evidence that refuses to speak clearly, we are left with a shadow where certainty should exist. What began as a question about a lost Roman army becomes something much larger. It becomes a window into how empires function under pressure, how failures are managed, and how history is shaped not only by what is recorded, but by what is deliberately left out. The Ninth Legion challenges the myth of Roman invincibility and reminds us that even the most organized civilization in the ancient world could lose control of its own story. Whether the legion vanished in the misty north of Britain, collapsed slowly through attrition, was destroyed on a distant frontier, or quietly erased for political reasons, its fate exposes the limits of power. Rome could conquer land, command armies, and carve its dominance into stone, but it could not guarantee that the truth would survive intact. The mystery endures because it has no single answer, only layers. Each generation strips one away and discovers another beneath it. And in that process, the Ninth Legion continues to march not through territory, but through debate, imagination, and historical inquiry. In the end, the Ninth Legion is not just lost to history. It stands as a reminder that silence itself can be evidence, that absence can speak volumes, and that the past is often far more fragile and far more human than the empires that tried to control it.